Hello, welcome to Steve McDonald Arts and Crafts, and today I'm going to go through my few simple steps that everyone can follow to help improve your resin work. This video is not about PPE, personal protection, or making sure that you're keeping yourself safe. I've done a lot of videos on that. I talk about that a lot in my other videos. And it's really everybody's responsibility to ensure that you know what you're using, because these are chemicals after all, and to keep yourself safe. And if you want to check out some of my other videos where I've covered that, please feel free to do some. I will link them at the end of this video. Plan ahead. Make sure you know what you're going to need for your resin project for that moment. There's nothing worse than getting a quarter of a way through the resin project and you realise that your mica powder or something else is over the other side of where you keep it or put away in a tin, or your glitters or anything like that. So make sure before you start that you have everything around you. It will really make a difference and make things a lot less stressful, and also you won't make so much mess. Make sure that where you're working is clean and tidy so that dust or other particles don't automatically get attached to your resin. And also, if you're working on a board or in a mold or anything like that, make sure that is completely clean and free of dust as well. Now, I have got videos on how to protect your molds and how to store your molds in my behind the scenes video, so check that one out. But it's really important, I always make sure that everything is clean. I go over it first with a little bit of 99% alcohol on a lint-free rag. Especially for a board if I'm going to be doing a pour painting, because it stops you getting the dimples and other little bits in it. Use the right resin for the job. There's lots of different resins out there, so make sure that you research which resin is the right one for your job. There's no point using a really thin resin if you're going to be doing a picture and you don't want the resin to run off the edge. You want it to kind of stay where it is. But equally, if you're doing a casting, a thinner resin will also help you avoid bubbles. Additionally, if you're making coasters and things like that, ensure that the resin that you're using is heat resistant. Because there's nothing worse than putting a hot cup on a coaster that you've given to someone or sold to someone, and then it starts to mark it and kind of melt the resin. When you are measuring out your resin, and if you're using it by volume, ensure that you put a little mark with a permanent marker on the outside of the jug for each of the measurements. It makes it so much easier to be able to ensure that you're getting the right amount of resin, because when clear resin goes into a silicone mixing jug, it often makes the numbers disappear. But also, it enables you to be 100% accurate with your measuring. And prevents any problems with your resin not curing properly or staying sticky in spots. Read the instructions carefully, because a lot of resins mix up very differently. You might find that your resin is a 1-to-1 ratio, or it could be a 2-to-1 ratio. By volume. But there are resins as well, and I use them a lot, that are mixed up by weight rather than volume. So ensure that you know what your resin requires you to do to mix it accurately, because accurately mixed resin very rarely gives you any problems when it's curing. It makes a big difference. Accurate measuring of your resin before it's mixed is really important. And this is a really important one, and in fact they're all important, but they're easy steps, is about avoiding adding bubbles to your resin when you're mixing it. Make sure that you mix your resin slowly. There's no need to beat it as if you're making an omelette. Mix it slowly, scrape around the edges and the bottom and whatever you're using to mix it with on the side for the recommended time. And what you'll find is you will introduce far fewer bubbles into your resin, which is what we all want, really. If you're mixing a lot of resin up, more than probably about 100 ml, I would say, then decant that into smaller pots. Because what you'll find is it will cure a lot slower in the pot because the exothermic reaction isn't as great, and you'll get a lot more working time. I certainly do that the majority of the time when I'm mixing up resin. And a lot of people don't do this because they're a little bit impatient, and I used to be guilty of this as well, is after I've mixed my resin up and decanted it into pots, I let it sit for about 5 minutes. It's still well within the working time, and what that does is that allows it to degas. Okay, all the bubbles that can come up to the top will come up to the top. So leave it for 5 minutes to degas. Really does help. And this is another problem that I see a lot of people do, especially when they're casting, and that is they got the resin there, they pour it straight into the cast really quickly from a high height, and what it does is it introduces bubbles. It also disrupts whatever's inside. So pour slowly. Whether that's a picture or whether it's a casting, pour really slowly. You don't need to pour fast, and try and pour in a thin stream as well, because that'll help reduce the bubbles, and as close to what you're pouring onto or into as possible, because again, that will help reduce the bubbles. Cover your work after you've done it as soon as possible and leave it covered unless you desperately have to check on it. That will help avoid any dust or lint or fine hairs floating around in the air in wherever you're working and landing in your resin. It also helps prevent spiders and flies getting into it. Not that I've ever had a spider in it, but I have had little flies all of a sudden get into it. And when it's cured, you think, oh no, that's ruined it, and you've got to do a lot of work to get rid of them. Where if you cover it, they don't get in it. Don't be tempted to touch whatever you've cast or poured until you're sure that it's cured. Even if it's not wet and it's not cured properly, you can leave fingerprints behind in the curing resin, and it does kind of spoil what you're doing. So leave it to cure for the time that you need to leave it to cure. We're all a little bit guilty of this. I know I am, but I do try to stop myself. So they're my top tips to help improve your resin work. I hope you've enjoyed this video and you've learned something from it, and maybe reminded you of one of the tips that you do know but you're not using. Please leave a comment in the comments below and hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe and check out my YouTube channel as well, How to Resin with Steve McDonald. It's becoming really popular. It's a great little community, and actually there's people posting on it a lot and helping each other out. And also check the links for all the items that I've mentioned in the description below, and they'll take you straight to those products. Thank you very much. Enjoy your resin. Take care. Bye.